Welcome to the Adventures of Los Angeles. My name is Andy McGregor, and I have the wonderful honor of serving as first vice president this year. We are a 100-plus-year-old organization that almost every Thursday, rain, shine, war, and plague, has met to discuss, glorify, and disseminate information about having adventures, going on adventures, becoming an adventure, and the wonderful joys within. And in that glorious tradition, I am pleased and ecstatic to welcome to the stage Bob Inman, who is the author of the book Urban Hikes of Southern California, in addition to several grand feats of architectural brilliance. And Bob, welcome to the stage, and thank you for enlightening us.
Well, thank you very much, Andrew. It's really quite an honor to be here. This is just an amazing environment. Even tonight, what I've just heard before we went on live, it's just so many people with amazing stories. So I'm very happy you asked me to come talk to you.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, the concept of an urban hike, right? That seems almost like a paradox. Like people leave urbanity to go on hikes.
Yeah, it's kind of turning things on its head. I mean, one person said it's kind of like, well, the last place to explore that you would think of is your own backyard, and that's what we do, and it's both to get some exercise in it and to discover, and it, as you'll see when I have some examples, it's meant to enhance your outdoor adventures too. Doesn't have to take the place of it. So
yeah, just to kind of give people an idea of this framework you're working from, what's the difference between a hike and a walk?
Well, that's and I don't want to get too hung up on it because I always think of walking as being like one of the great personal freedoms. So it doesn't necessarily need a lot of definition, but people do talk about it, and you will hear me go back and forth saying walk when I might say hike and back and forth. I think a hike involves a certain amount of purpose, a certain amount of planning, a certain amount of time and length. It's very subjective. I'd say, at least a couple hours, length, at least 4 miles or so. But I think it's more just the attitude involved. I mean, a walk is something that's more casual that you don't really do with, you just sort of fall into, and it's wonderful to do. A hike is more something you prepare for, and you, whether it's in a natural environment, as most people do hike, or in an urban environment, it's a little more purposeful and has a certain attitude tied to it that's a little different from just walking.
Yeah, in some of our previous conversations, it seemed that this book was the culmination of like a near lifetime of exploration and things like that. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, how your own personal journeys led to creating this great resource and community?
Yeah, it's, I'm a lifelong hiker. I did maybe about 60% of the Muir Trail when I was 16, started hiking in the Scouts, active hiking. I went to Occidental College and was president of the hiking club, and that seemed to be at times my college major. And hiked in mainly, initially the Sierra Nevada was certainly primary for me, but then Desert Southwest, and then starting in my 30s, I loved going to Europe, first Switzerland, but then particularly Great Britain for hiking, to go make it part of my vacations. And that's continued. I still love doing that. Done a lot of hiking, interesting trips in the Desert Southwest. I've hiked the width of the Scottish Highlands. Of course, that's kind of also a little bit subjective, but from Perth to Fort William, I did that 6 years ago as a through hike with a couple of friends, and you'll see an illustration of that as we go along. But that was 9 days of good. Of course, they typically would say walking in the UK. They don't use the word hiking much, even if it is severe. But that's so I got into, I think it was in my 30s, I lived in the East Coast and just for 4 years, and I lived outside of Philly. and got exposed to great cities, and I loved, I was kind of there as a semi, as a, for discovery as a tourist, and I loved kind of, sometimes I was preparing, I'd always had an annual trip back to California to do a backpack, so sometimes like, well, I put in 10 miles just to, kind of prepare for that, and it just came natural to do that and combine it with enjoying discovering these cities. And so that's a lot of what I'm going to be talking about and showing illustrations of. It's not necessarily hiking city trails, it's really hiking the city streets, really being kind of in your face urban. And I thought, isn't this great? You can do this in DC and Philly and New York City. And I had a friend who just said, just how amazing it was to walk from Manhattan, from the up to the North End down to the Battery, and all the different, every couple few blocks, it seems like the city changes, the culture changes, and I think, isn't that amazing that, and you can just have that while walking. And then I moved back to LA by mid-30s, and I thought, I know LA very well, but not from, for me, LA was, if I hiked in the streets, it'd just be like, make sure the backpack fit, or something, and I thought, you can mix really discovery walking in LA, in the streets, and attack LA the way you might attack the historic areas of DC. And that's kind of how I got into it.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's a mentality shift that you came home again with new eyes, right? One of my favorite novels is You Can't Go Home Again, but it was that mentality, like a New Yorker would probably not go to the Statue of Liberty ever, right, if you're born and raised there. Mm-hmm. But after you'd left the city of your birth, you then kind of had this foreigner's curiosity about it. And then LA in particular, obviously there's the car culture and the legendary gridlock. And something that I've noticed is that native Angelenos kind of feel that their cars are an extension of personal space, but I always felt the car was like a trap, like, oh, we have to go through this. So yeah, how did you kind of mix or like see through the car culture thing, and then also have this, you're returning to your homeland, but with the kind of eyes of a foreigner, if you will?
Let's say the second question first. I think it was, I kind of felt out of touch with my having been away with and I had a lot of LA cred as I grew up in Silver Lake District, which is kind of central to Los Angeles. It's a very iconic neighborhood that really is, it's not, particularly suburban, it's a very urban area. My dad worked for the city parks department as a public relations photographer, and he would go far and near in the city parks department and take me along sometimes when it was summer vacation. And I'd learn learn the difference from Rustic Canyon to Venice to Averill Park in San Pedro to El Sereno. And so I felt like, well, I need to kind of, renew those credentials. And so that was, it's the first thing I needed to do. The car culture was, I'm still an enthusiast driver. I love driving Los Angeles. I think all these, when you're not caught up in traffic, there's so many different ways to go, and the scene changes, and I love that. But I think you still get channeled into thinking, well, to go here, you go this way. And even though this is here, you go kind of this way. You don't really associate these points that aren't that far apart. And of course you would think, well, obviously hiking makes things seem more far away in a big city like Los Angeles. I would find, in some cases, they actually make them seem a little closer, because you kind of break down these little boundaries and you find these little curvy streets that unify one neighborhood with the other, and you see, it's like, it's not as fast as hopping in your car and driving it, but it kind of breaks down, some of the ideas you have in your head about this is here and this is here and this is here. And you start to learn how to flow between neighborhoods and just kind of really discover different parts of the city the way that when I was like in New York or the neighborhoods of Washington, D.C., what I had been learning, that, how you just sort of flow through the city and learn different parts of it, and how that was great for my college experience was in American cultural history, American, and so I mean I love the idea of cities, and I've always been kind of an urbanist, but I've also loved being a hiker, and this sort of brought it together.
Yeah, I was wondering, could you touch on the idea of like LA's history? Because so much of LA's history is, I guess, 30% mythology. But you're able, because people come here and you literally can become or do anything. And kind of the opposite side of that is there's like, I don't know, like an indifference to destruction. Like if a restaurant goes out of business, it's like, all right, what, the next thing, blah, blah, blah. But by actually addressing the city's cultural heritage through a pedestrian means, you have a deeper kind of cultural and historical connection. Can you give kind of an example of that or touch on that a little bit?
Well, yeah, I think when you're walking or hiking, you're at the same scale, you're at a totally different scale with this built environment than you would be driving through it. And of course, some of the built environment is made to match up with people driving on roads, but you get to appreciate little nuances. You get to appreciate, something as simple as air raid sirens and old signage, things that had been converted but not entirely converted. Sometimes you find, you turn the corner and you find, it's the perfect, example of what it may have been, mostly torn down. But you say, well, look, this one's still standing. It's people are taking good care of it. So, in a car, unless you're, with walking, you see it and then later appreciate. Sometimes with driving, it's like, well, you read about it in a book, you hear about it in a lecture, and you hop in your car and go see it. And I think I certainly prefer kind of coming upon it on your own and then maybe going back and say, what was that anyway? And learning about it. But yes, Los Angeles has a pretty bad history as far as just reprocessing. Well, that's out of style. That's gone. We'll build this instead. That's gone. And it's interesting in architectural discussions because now we're getting a third and fourth generation of things that they say, oh no, they're going to tear down this to build this. And well, of course, when they built that, they tore down something else, and so there's always it's just the way things go. But it doesn't, obviously I'm glad for our, historic preservation, and a lot of that has been slowed down, and there's a lot more recognition of historic neighborhoods. That's one of the things I like. One of the first things when I'm planning where to walk is looking up through the resources and say, okay, well, this neighborhood's been designated as a historic preservation overlay zone, or this neighborhood's been cited in Survey LA as being just a distinct cluster, even if it's only 5, 6, 10 structures. And you see the same with Pasadena, Long Beach, and Santa Ana, Santa Monica. Certainly, all these communities have pretty good associations that recognize their history. So I mean, that's a good place to look. You say, where am I going to walk to? Besides the fact, you want interesting streets and everything, but that's something you want to include.
Yeah, we have a lot of amazing visuals about said topics. Should we start showing some of those pictures? And,
walk
us through it? Can you see the pictures behind me on the screen? Or should we
yeah, right. So we just went kind of talking about what goes into an urban hike. And you can't see him as well as I thought I was going to.
Can we tilt the screen? I'll tilt the screen, actually. I'm closest.
Yeah. I see. Okay, so kind of starting with, what do we want on an urban hike? Because we want, we don't want it to be a march down, boulevards. We avoid that. We want streets that kind of read like trails. Because, I love trail hiking. And, a great thing about, when you're hiking a trail, you don't want that, say a natural trail. You don't want that trail where you can see a half mile ahead what's coming and it's all the same. Or you're in a, a forest, and all the trees look the same. You got the same lake going by you for 3 hours, and you want things to change. And the best urban hiking routes that we look for are streets that have ebb and flow, streets that bob and weave and zigzag and have good views. Streets that give you greenery. I mean, just because you're not hiking in a national park, or it doesn't mean you're forsaking, the natural environment. Of course, it's all invented here. It'd be, trees are planted. Mostly trees don't even belong here. But you go in, streets that have good gardens and streetscape. You aim for things like that. You aim for, the best streets typically are the ones that are narrow, that don't have sidewalks, but, and curve through the hills. I mean, I always say that Los Angeles has there's a lot of experiences in walking Los Angeles that actually come off as being like on a country lane. It's just that, yes, there are a lot of houses around, but they're quiet, not a whole lot of cars. A lot of these streets are not that easy to drive. I'm talking about all over, whether Hollywood Hills or Echo Park or Eagle Rock or Highland Park. They're not that easy to drive, and that's of course what makes them attractive to walk through. And that's one of the ideals you seek after. Another thing, you want variety. Just like when you're on a hike, you want variety of biodiversity or something like that. With an urban hike, of course, it's all about human accomplishment, the human scene. I think we can go on to, so what do you put into a hike to make it work? Because I mean, yes, it's not all streets. So there's a lot of things that people that are in our built environment that you can enjoy to make a good hike. I mean, one thing that's really popular in Los Angeles and some other cities is the stairways. I mean, I think just about any discussion of urban hiking in America, you very often focuses on public stairways. That's sort of the number one avenue people get really excited about, and I could spend the whole evening just talking about public stairways because that's the first thing I wrote about. But there's also there's a lot of other things you can look for, connections made through trails. I don't think if you're just going to go in the middle of Griffith Park and hike Griffith Park for 3 hours, that's not really an urban hike. That's like a trail hike that sort of emulates, woods, a mountain hike, because you're not really, maybe you see a few people on the trail, and maybe you're, say, P22 or something, but you come back to the car and really you had more of a nature walk. For me, urban hiking is about being on streets, being on sidewalks, being where people live, where people do business. And we kind of blend, we look for, because you have to come out of the neighborhoods, you have to come out maybe to refill your water bottles, find a restroom, buying food. So we do also incorporate the little business districts. Of course, we aim for little, streets that really are narrow and have a nice scale for pedestrians, and maybe have, some nice cafes or, coffee places are good to stop at for restrooms. And maybe look in the shops a little bit, but that's just sort of that's a break, and then you basically, where am I going to walk next? But there's a lot of things you may not think of. I mean, abandoned railways, meaning mainly the streetcars. And there's a wonderful one on the right there, in Silver Lake, the old red car line that used to connect downtown to Glendale and beyond. And it's a hiking path. It is partially privately owned, and you have to kind of slip through, but it's still available. There's partially fenced off. People have talked about it's not accessible anymore, but that's not true. You can still walk through most of it. But you think of even La Jolla. I had a picture of a rail right away in La Jolla. You don't think of La Jolla as being a place for old railways, but you sort of think of things like that. Pedestrian bridges add a lot of flavor. And that's kind of how you build your walk.
Yeah, you said something fascinating about stairways, because stairways in the context of an office building are drudgery. But you're right, stairways in the context of a city are these like magical portals. And then also a book on stairways was kind of the genesis of this work in a way for you, right? I was wondering if you could kind of conjecture about the mythical appeal of the stairway.
It's funny, I was growing up in Silver Lake, which was really kind of the Stairway key neighborhood in the whole city. And I knew about some of the stairways. I used them. There's something that school kids would use to come and go from school. And but I had a break in work, and a self-enforced break where I burned out of one job and I thought I'm going to take a year off before I go to the next. And I don't have any money to travel, so I'm going to travel to LA. And then I had a book laid on my bookshelf, probably already been on the bookshelf for 15 years, about the original book about stairways in Los Angeles, the Stairway Walks. And then I thought, this is really neat, but I know they missed a bunch. And, there's others out there, and I kind of did some research and found others and made kind of a list. And I thought, well, nobody else cares about this. You don't really see people on them. This is back, mid, say 2004, 2005. And the whole now, since then, and not just because of me, but there is a huge fascination for stairway. You tell people you're going to lead a stairway hike, and they're like, I'm in. People loved how they, number one, stairways usually are found in great neighborhoods because the neighborhood's hilly to accommodate a stairway. Neighborhood's usually old, usually has smaller lots, smaller houses, which are good. That makes more walkable neighborhoods rather than neighborhoods full of vast estates. And you get into this whole thing about, well, I'm going to walk all the stairways. And so we got into doing that. And I think there is, because the connection, people have a kind of a nostalgia for the streetcar era, and in some cases, not all cases, but some cases, the stairways were built for the streetcars. So I think there's a connection there. Stairways just put you into, it's even sometimes between the bottom of the stairway and the top of the stairway is a complete change in social strata. They offer a lot of, a lot of little narrow windows that are 40 inches wide, and they just offer a lot of entertainment.
What's your favorite stairway?
What's
your child question?
I guess Eldred. Eldred is, we may have had a picture of it already. Eldred's a wood stairway that joins Highland Park to Mount Washington. And of course, part of the drama, Eldred, is Eldred's at the end of Eldred Street. Eldred Street is the steepest street in Los Angeles, and people get arguments about this. It may be the second steepest street in the U.S. There's a street in Pittsburgh that's steeper. So to get to the stairway, first you get up this steep street, and it's busts the calves, and you look down. In fact, that was I think of a picture we used in the promotion here, where we're all staring down at the ground because you don't really want to look until it's never, the end is never there. And the funny thing is, then you get to the wooden stairway, and that's actually relief because this actually comes easier, and it's full of all these beautiful. You're surrounded by these beautiful California native black walnut trees. And just open ground, and it's got this. Most stairways, of course, are now rebuilt in concrete if they ever were built in wood, but Eldred's still wood, and it's has this. In fact, that's Eldred on the right there, and it's charming, and then suddenly it's just a big neighborhood shifts from Highland Park to, if you're going up, to Mount Washington. That's a big shift, and right at the top you have a great view. So that certainly makes it my favorite. It's about 190 steps. It's not the longest, but it's, I think, the most enjoyable. I always call it Mighty Eldred.
Is there a governing body of stair steepness in America with people vying for the most hardcore
it's funny, there is. The closest thing to that, and he does a pretty good job. There's a fellow in Seattle named Doug Byerland, and he started a first a web page and then a Facebook group called Friends of Public Stairs. And he gets contributions. I mean, so you get, it lines up different cities, how many stairways they have and how many he likes to, because otherwise the whole conversation would just get out of control. He says a major public stairway, outdoor public stairway, meaning 100 steps or more. So, there's a lot of beautiful stairways of 40, 50, 60 steps, but that's not what he lists, just to put some sort of limitation. So Pittsburgh in the US has by far got both the most public stairways and the most major public stairways of over 100 steps. San Francisco, while having more public stairways, somehow Los Angeles squeaked in with more that are over 100. Seattle has many, and you'll see an example towards the end of my talk of a stairway walk I did in Seattle. Cincinnati, there's a lot of in the Mississippi Valley, surprising, there's a lot of, individual little clusters of stairways, but those are really, but so occasionally you do have people say, well, I climbed the highest stairway, like one of the highest ones of all places, Hood, Oregon, right up from the Columbia, and it's beautiful. I mean, it just goes on forever. It just, and I think it's 400 and something steps, and I'm happy to say I've went up it, and it's fun.
Is there a monk at the top who challenges you to like logging kung fu or?
Some of these stairways, it seems like you should have something at the top awaiting you because you feel like it's a lot of work to go up them.
Yeah, another fascinating concept you've touched on is this idea of invasive versus native flora and fauna, which is almost a kind of political extrapolation onto a natural process. But in the course of all your wandering over your life in LA, can you talk, like, is there like a beauty of like a native California plant as opposed to this, thing from abroad, or can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, through most of my life, something, because I'm not anything like a biologist, wasn't thinking something people really talked about. We're just, we're used to a native, well, eucalyptus, that's native, isn't it? Jacaranda, isn't that native? I mean, they're all over, but so I think, now we learn more, and there's some good books out there about what is and what is not, and where, so the history of how some of these plants came here in itself is fascinating. I think there's a special joy in a well-cultivated garden of natives. I think it's you get to appreciate it, and certainly some neighbor. I mean, I think of Mount Washington in particular. The oak I mentioned before, black walnut, California black walnut. There's a lot of, that is native, and you can just see those. And there's some parcels have been preserved by, say, Santa Monica Mountain Conservancy, because of the wealth of that. And you can't help but feel, excited to walk through something like that.
In some of your writings, you also discuss the difference between a solo and group urban hike. Can you just talk about some of the psychological / historical differences in those experiences and how you try to share them?
In most people's experience, and most people who do urban hiking, is it's done, with a couple of buddies, done a couple of people, maybe, partners or something, spouses, and people do it on their own. And that's, I think, I lead these groups. I mean, that's something I started in 2005. It kind of was, I had just kind of found, that's like I mentioned, I was between jobs. So I knew that I'd been researching all this stuff and learning all this stuff. So this is amazing. I got to show all my friends. And, oh no, I got a job. I won't have time to do that. So even though I hate usually doing long walks in summer, but I invited my friends that come with me, and in the beginning of July, because I start work and let's do this 16-mile walk we'll start in Beechwood Canyon, we'll come out to Chinatown. And I didn't even know, it's like, this is before Google and the apps and everything. I didn't even know how far it was. It's like, well, it's like, I'm just throwing a number out there. I don't know how far this is. And I used to be how I'd measure by saying, well, that took me an hour and 23 minutes and then divide it backwards. So anyway, we did that. And that got me into leading group walks because I thought, well, this is fun. I mean, I guess I have this instinct that I really want to share this stuff. And, but of course, in the beginning, I like to say, because two people who were on those original walks, and I do a couple a year, and I got to I got to the idea that I think they're starting to come on my walks because they're feeling sorry for me and they don't want me to go out by myself. But and unfortunately, I met up with a group. This is now looking fast forward to say 2009. I met a group of enthusiasts that really love this idea of urban hiking and doing the stairs and everything. And then I just started meeting people with them, and I used social media, and I had groups that got crazy big and all that. But I mean, as I think I have it in paper there, I've done I don't know, something at 370 over now we're talking 12 years in my intense period, about 370 walks, averaging about 9 miles per walk, averaging about 25 people per walk, and that's a lot. I do it a little differently now, but where I restrict. I don't use social media, and where at least I want to know who's coming in advance, and so it's a little different. And I think I'm not the only one to do it now. I mean, there's several big walking events in the city. There's this big event every fall called the Great Los Angeles Walk that usually does something like, say, start in downtown and take Olympic all the way to Santa Monica or something like that. But that's done. This one fellow, Michael Snyder, who's this is like his one event, and it's people love it, and they guess maybe 200-300 people show up. But it's saying that is you don't walk together basically. So, there ain't no turns. You just take Olympic till you're out of the ocean, or Santa Monica or Wilshire, whichever street you're doing that year. But then you'll get to. But he also, to his credit, encourages people, don't run through this thing. There's no race. Just wander off, and here's the things you can see. So that's a big thing that goes on in LA every year. There's we used to have something, we're going to cover him in the end of the talk too. Dan Capel just organized something called the Big Parade, which is a big group event. I don't see this in other cities, and I wonder why. That I think in other cities, maybe they would say, oh, you guys in LA, you just can't be alone. You can't stand to be alone or something. It's like, I think in LA, expectations are so low. Everyone has this sort of, wow, who knew? So they join these groups because they think they'll never find these places on their own. And I certainly don't doubt that there's tons of urban hiking done every day in Seattle and in San Francisco, and there's some books on it, but you don't see the group events. So the group events seems to be kind of an LA phenomena. And so.
What was the experience like during the worst of COVID?
Well, I pretty much had to shut down. I had like 4 events scheduled, like 3 weeks, in a 3-week period, and I had to cancel them all. And and essentially in the beginning you say, well, but we're all going to be outdoors. Why do you have to cancel? There's crowding and narrow spots and everything. It's just, this is on very good advice that, we're not supposed to be doing stuff like this anymore. So I shut it down. I took that time. I did a lot of walking on my own because, how I remember those times when the whole idea is, well, don't leave your neighborhood. Just anything you could do, go out your front door and come back to your front door. So it's like, for me, it's like, well, how far can I walk before I need a restroom? So I discovered some new routes, and And then I waited till it really was until, vaccinations were available, and I just invited a couple people, just kind of feel our way through it, and we wore masks and everything, and then I went to leading groups that were, say, 10 to 15 people, and all people I knew, and we just kind of built back out of that. But I haven't gone back to where I don't plan to go back. I mean, I've had groups, 100 people show up. I was like, what are you people doing here? You think I'm giving something away besides the fact that this walk? But and I mean, it's on the one hand, it's wonderful. It's like it's sort of validating. People love this, but I don't think I can't imagine it's going to be fun for them or for me. The fact, if all we're going to do is wait for people to catch up and see who we lost. So and it'd be typical for me to have 35, 40 people. And it's just, especially when I said the type of routes we like to take, we're not going straight down Olympic. That's not my type of walk. We're winding around the hills, and every intersection is potentially like a trail junction. You could this way, or this way, and so you want people to be able to follow you. So now I'm dealing with my post-COVID and probably permanent approach to group walking is some areas I'll limit to about 15, other areas 25. It kind of depends on, like I said, how difficult as far, well, some, physically difficult, but also how confusing the route might be and how the likelihood of losing people. And sometimes it's a matter of, some neighborhoods, I would do some walks now. Some neighborhoods where I used to walk, I would not even go with more than about 5 people, because there's so much sensitivity now towards, gentrification in some neighborhoods or cultural appropriation. And it's just like, just bad optics. You show up with 25 people walking behind you, and you say, what are those clowns doing? So, it's fine to come with 4 or 5, 6 friends, and I'd say that if I walk in, say, Lamert Park or Boyle Heights, beautiful. And I used to lead bigger groups in Boyle Heights, but I've adjusted that it's not like because I love those neighborhoods. They're beautiful neighborhoods that can't be missed, but I think they don't, arriving with a big group just would not be appreciated. And I don't want to be a bad guest.
What do you think accounts for kind of the wonder? Is it the nature of that navigation, right? Because it's not with a smartphone and it's not in a car. It's just like follow the wise mystic as we go through fantastic architecture and learn stories. Is that part of? Because you're like, what are you people doing here? Like, we're just going for a walk in the city. Get out of here. Yeah. Like you throw your shoe at them or something. But like, is that part of it? That kind of novel, ancient form of navigation of I'm going to lead you on a secret path that only I know, that's full of wonder and joy.
Well, I'd hate to say, I'd hate to put it like that. I want to put it more modestly than that. But piece it together. I don't know. I guess I'm honored that people keep coming back. That people I put out. I say, okay, 20 people, and if it's on a weekend, it fills up, and people say, oh, we got room for more. I said, no, sorry, but you got a variety of things. I think some people, there's urban anxiety is a real thing, and I think some people like the idea of doing it in groups. It's because they know. They read the papers and they, there's. So, well, this is supposed to be really happening area. There's all these great things to see, but I'm not sure I feel comfortable walking out there by myself, or even walking with a friend, but not really going exactly where I'm going. And I have, I put a lot of work in my routes as far as trial and error. This block's better than this block, and the restrooms here don't even go inside. Just go over here, and this is a good place to stop to get some food. And this place isn't open on Sunday, so don't do the walk on Sunday. And So there's some of that. There's, you have one of the people that really add a lot to my walks are incomers. People who, because there's a lot of creative people that move into Los Angeles, and they're curious and they want to learn about the place and their new home, and this is what they want. I mean, I think a lot of the old timers have that sort of, and I know this person because I'm he sometimes, but that's sort of been there, done that. Oh, this guy can't show me anything. I don't really know, and well, they're wrong. So I think that I get a certain amount of people who want that, who just are new to the area, even if new meaning 6, 7 years, but they really want to feel a little more rooted in the place and know what's there. So I think that's part of the allure. I think the best thing I ever hear is God, I had no idea this was here. And I come through here all the time. It's like, and yes, some people want the chat. I mean, my walks, especially, I do a lot of 5-mile walks. There may be more neighborhood discovery rather than, say, a big up and down hill challenge. And some people love those, and not saying that they're not up for the hill challenge, but I mean they love the detail. But those walks go slower. And I warn people in advance. This is more of a, I hate the word tour because I still want to say what I'm doing is exercise first and foremost. It's not like walking with the Conservancy going around the block, but some people are really into that, and some people, it's like, I know some people keep going on walks. I know they don't, they've heard it, either they've heard it before, or just they're looking at the devices ready to get started again. But so that's different. People have different, what they're after, different things.
Do you think LA is a knowable city?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I think it's fun to know it. I mean, I think it's, I think it's a lot of the cases, you could be wrong, but of what you think you know it and you're wrong. But I think there's a lot of ways, but you just have to learn it by being out there, and I think being on foot really helps. If you don't know, it isn't knowable by watching disaster flicks that show LA being, destroyed by earthquakes and every other thing, and floods, and it's LA's good prime candidate for that. And that's what a lot of people like to think of LA is in terms of, film noir and I think, I know, because I read these social media groups and people they can't get over the fact that LA doesn't look like Raymond Chandler's here anymore. They can't accept that LA in the 30s doesn't exist anymore. So, you just have to get over that. You really have to see it in person. And, I think, part of it is meeting people and knowing people, and that's part of knowing it too.
Yeah, and you're kind of describing a way of being. Is there an example of like a deep knowledge you learned through this pedestrian way of gaining knowledge and historical understanding that you wouldn't have had otherwise?
A deep knowledge. I mean, I do have, because I hate to say it, I mean, I shouldn't choose even the same as a response to the question, deep. I mean, for me, I have, a compass now that of where things are and what to expect and how, and it has nothing to do with using the apps. It's just, so that's maybe my knowledge. I mean, I think, you can read some literature and look at movies and nod and say, yeah, they got that right. And then others, oh, where did they get that? I mean, it's so cliche, and that's not like this city is. And so you run into that all the time. I can't say that necessarily. I mean, I guess I've found, for me, maybe the deeper connection is just the association with the people that come with me. And it's amazing that, they contribute so much, as they tell me stuff I didn't know, and they especially see things I never see. It's like I'm busy leading the walk, and I may even scout it out twice, and then someone comes with me one time and takes a picture, and was that on our walk? Where was that? And because that's one of the joys of having people with you, because it's an amazing group of people, and they're really curious, and so that to me is maybe of my experience, my deep experience of doing this whole LA the urbanism thing, is just associating with these people, with people I share the city with, and learning from them. Well, I can try to offer them something that they, offer them something as well.
Yeah, it's like this kind of peripatetic historical knowing by doing the physical act. You've somehow become this unintentional inspiring force, right? You've led the thousands and thousands of people through this process. Are there stories of community, or do you even view yourself as a community leader, or that people have said, like, oh, I met my wife on your walk, or like, I learned this, or what are some of the kind of the consequences of community that has resulted from you doing this?
Well, I kind of like the fact that I'm still kind of in the background. I think, say for example, there's a fellow a lot of people know, really, the Mr. Stairway in Los Angeles, Charles Fleming. He's got a good face for it. He's a younger guy, writes for the LA Times. Some people may know him because he's also the automotive writer for the LA Times. And he wrote this book, this fabulous bestseller called Secret Stairs. And he, great personality. And I am delighted that he's out there. I wish I got some of the money that he got out of this, but I mean, I'm delighted that he's out there being kind of the face of the whole, a lot of the Stairway enthusiasm. And I just try to, it's like I've got, I enjoy the following I have. But I do feel, I've been honored by this advocacy group, LA Walks, for that's their for contributing to pedestrianism. I think, even though I participated in this architecture book that is quite well known, and I was in on the final editing. It's architecture. It's a guidebook to architecture in Los Angeles County. And people started associating me with that because that book is very well known, and I'm kind of caught up by the coattails, just because a retired professor, who was my professor at Occidental College, asked me to come in and do the last edition, which was a tremendous honor. And but I think still my face in LA is what I guess I want to be known for most, is maybe writing the guidebook to actual walking as opposed to architecture, and the fact that I lead the walks. And I don't, sometimes it seems like there's stairway closure issues or some sort of LA preservation issues, and maybe there, I'm thought, well, maybe I should be a spokesperson, and I rarely take that bite on that. I just, I think I put a lot of time into what I'm doing, and I'm happy for that. And a lot of younger, more, persuasive and eloquent people can actually do the arguing for some of the preservation issues.
How does your architectural kind of appreciation fit into the curation of a hike?
It started before I was even invited to be rewriting this book, because I used to use this book in older copies, and it's like, start with a blank slate of, okay, I want to walk in this area. What's here? And you comb through. Sometimes it could be a lot of different sources. But okay, one of the first things I would do is, okay, let's look at the Gebhardt Winter Guide to Architecture. And okay, pin these things. Now I do it with a Google map, but before I might have put little circles on a paper map. But so okay, and then okay, where are the stairways? Look at this cool murals over here, things you might hear of secondhand, things like that. And you just sort of, you make a route. So the architecture is one of the things I aim for, but it's part of the whole process. It's part, you're still, it doesn't really go, I mean, you know, it doesn't, I'm not gonna follow architecture to go straight out Santa Monica Boulevard for 8 miles. You know, it's like, I still want a route that's beautiful, that engages people because of the nature of the streets and the trees and the neighborhoods and the houses you're passing and maybe, and then yes, there's some good architecture along the way. And yes, maybe we go out of the way to see that, you know, Frank Lloyd Wright or a Gregory Ain tract of homes or something. But, you know, I think at the heart is you want that part still, you know, like I said, at the heart is you want to provide some exercise and you want to provide it in an area, you know, streets that really kind of flow and give you the kind of sensation of hiking and not as opposed to touring. And yes, if it's, you know, if you come by and there's this fantastic bungalow court, you know, let's stop and talk about it. And all sorts of, you know, there's things that, you know, of course the architecture, a lot of people from LA, and I'm can plead guilty to this sometimes, a lot of what the appreciation of architecture of LA, because LA has had such a great amount of eclectic architecture that you'd say, buildings that go up, you say, could not even be built anywhere else. I mean, what were they thinking of it? And could not even be built here, especially in the 20s. And people, you know, a lot of it was inspired by the film business. And you know, well, I saw this French chateau in the movie, and I want my house to look like that. And, you know, homes that, you know, tombs, you know, apartment courtyards built like Egyptian, you know, like the Pharaoh's castle, you know, Pharaoh's pyramid, and homes that look like, you know, there's a picture we probably went by already of, it looked like a pueblo, and then of course all the programmatic architecture, you know, something that looks like a coffee pot or a hot dog or a donut, or, you know, and so I mean, people love that stuff. So I mean, you know, I'm more likely, and people love streamlined modern and Art Deco. So I mean, yeah, people do like to see Neutra and Schindler, and if they're really into it, you know, Soriano and Lautner. But I think I get more enthusiasm for, you know, the bizarre stuff.
Yeah. When did the bizarre stuff begin? Because there's the Spanish colonial revival thing, and then it's just like, and what's wrong with the bizarre stuff, or is it all right?
Oh no, it's all right.
Yeah.
It's fine. It grew out of, I mean, it's just part and parcel. I mean, the programmatic architecture was kind of, which you can find in any city in the US, but here is a perfect match. And programmatic is just what I'm talking about. You know, something that looks like a barrel, or something like, you know, a building with, you know, a little cafe that has a coffee pot on top. And, you know, programmatic really matched with the new automobile craze, because it was meant, it's almost like a billboard saying, this is what you can get here, you know, and even though Randy's Donuts doesn't go back to the 1920s, that's essentially the same idea, you know. Also you have a number of things involved. You have, there's a lot of sort of, at least some examples of sort of Egyptian stuff or pseudo-Egyptian stuff in the 20s after the excavation of Tutankhamun's, you know, tomb. And that was like this whole, you know, there's a whole enthusiasm for that. There's a whole enthusiasm for Japanese stuff after, you know, the quote unquote opening of Japan. And a lot of the mission revival school was tied to this, now we're talking, so this goes back to 1890s, you know, there's this, suddenly in the 1880s, there's this new love and idolation and total, you know, unrealistic view of the missions in Spanish California and how these are all nirvana and we've lost all the missions, have all been altered, and they're falling apart, they're dissolved, the adobe's melted, and we need to have an architecture that kind of, and this wasn't just an architecture, it was like the whole idea with Ramona pageant and everything. I mean, this is like a big thing, and Charles Fletcher Lemus was a big part of that, is pushing, the whole mission thing as part of like, this is what's California. Because I mean, I think, people came out here, even Southern California is trying to find an identity that's not San Francisco. And, okay, well, let's latch onto this. And you see it, say even the Mission Inn in Riverside. And that was, it became a thing, it's like this is how we're going to identify ourselves. We're not going to have architecture like other people. So, this is our place. We want our own styles. And then you have in the 1920s, you had things like this sort of, people loved the idea of the pre-Columbian, which Frank Lloyd Wright got into that too. But pre-Columbian is, that's like a new. We need like an architecture of the Western Hemisphere. We don't want these European examples. So there's a lot of this sort of different influences going on. I mean, and Spanish colonial revival is just more. It's that too. I mean, people look at Spanish colonial revival and they think, well, of course that's natural. We have homes like that because that's what they found when the Yankees came into Southern California. Well, no, it wasn't. I mean, the buildings in the mid 1800s were basically either small pueblo type structures or farm type structures. Nothing like the elaborate Spanish colonial revival that came in the 1920s, but that's, again, it's kind of, it's probably the predominant style of Southern California, and it came in as, again, kind of sort of folklore. It's something, it's sort of a yearning for something, which I think there's a lot of that here. Yeah.
So speaking of putting your name to grand movements, you've created a marvelous trail called the Inman 400, right? 300. Yes, and it's somewhat connected to John Muir's work, or that's using commentary. Tell us about the 300.
Let's jump out of this group of photographs. Let's go to the next group because it doesn't apply here anymore. Now we're kind of beyond this. So. Not the next slide, but the next group. So thinking about, well, it's the last one. Back one group, let's see. People now, okay, right here. So let's start with first, there's, people are using the idea of hiking in a city. It doesn't have to be Los Angeles, but hiking the city as kind of replicating, at least as far as maybe the physical challenge, well, just statistically trying to replicate great feats. So this fellow wrote this book called Urban Everesting, and it's really kind of a lark. I mean, I don't really recommend it that much, but the idea is, okay, well, hike around and see how long it takes to build up 29,000 feet, or if you say maybe even 20, if you say, well, the base camp at Everest is 10, I think, and so, the rest 19,000 feet. So, this guy rates the cities as far as how good they serve as far as both green space and ability to go up and down and create a up and down hike. And so here's an example. I'm not sure of how well it portrays, but I mean, this is around Silver Lake. This is an example of something we do. I mean, this is just walk, there's a blue line that's kind of dotted that just shows a 22-mile path that that basically follows all the stairways. So that's why it goes back and forth and zigs and zags, because the idea is the stairways are your base. You're trying to climb these stairways. And sometimes you're going down stairways, but essentially you're going through the hills, and you make if you were just going to walk it directly from the beginning to the end, there'd be, I think you'd walk it in about 45 minutes. But I mean, this is, it takes 22 miles to do the circuitous route because you're following something, and what that is, in this case, is public stairways. And that's what we started with the idea of, this fellow, Dan Capel, started the idea of something called Stair Track, and the big parade. It was like, let's do all the stairways. And so I took that, so because I had this index to all the stairways, and a couple friends asked me, what if you did all the stairways in Los Angeles? And you just did them as a through hike, because these guys are through hikers. I mean, meaning a through hike is a hike that essentially you don't stop till you're done. I mean, you're through hiking with the Appalachian Trail. I mean, essentially you start at, Georgia and you finish in Maine, and every morning you pick up where you left off the day before. So here's the Inman 300 was, the name came from, they asked me, well, how many stairways would that be? And I was still kind of counting them, and I said, well, I think it's come out to around 300. And now it's actually about 370. So that's where the name 300 came. It has a nice ring. We never changed it to the Inman 369. But it's a walking route. It's basically just, it's kind of arbitrary, but how do you walk through Los Angeles and keep it interesting, not just, not just walking down Figueroa. And so starting in, we start with the north, in this group of stairways, contiguous stairways. We start in La Cunada, Flintridge, and we finish in San Pedro, and we wind around, and that little curvy line hardly even represents, all the zigzags and everything you do. And you could do this walk, if you just walk straight from the beginning of my route to the end of the route, it'd be about 39 miles. Do it the way I have it, where you're just going, where's the next stairway? And you're doing it as efficiently as possible. Sometimes it just means you do have to walk boulevards and stuff like that, because this isn't an architecture tour. This is like, okay, I did this stairway. But remember I said that stairways very often are in really beautiful neighborhoods. So, I mean, you're kind of ensuring a beautiful walk by concentrating on stairways. So, these friends asked me to do this and then actually come up with a route. And I said, no, number one, and they actually thought, and they're kind of right, that people would be interested. People would want to do this in the future. I said, number one, you're crazy just to even think of doing it ourselves, but then that there'd be further interest. Well, there was. I mean, we did it, and I modified it. When we did it, we had like bus intervals and things like that. But essentially, we did it, in 8 straight days, and we stayed inside. It's like we carried our stuff, but we didn't like camp out in the city or something like that. People can do that, but it's pretty, you can't really do it legally. I mean, I won't even get into that, where you can camp or not, but, or whether it be safe, I'd recommend it. But, so we did it, and then someone from outside the city said, I heard about this, I want to do it. So, and I'm going to cover her at the end, Liz Thomas. She came out and did it. And they had a magazine, Backpacker Magazine ran an article on it. And we've had, I've led it groups. Now I tend to use it, there's a difference between a through hike and a section hike. So a section hike means you don't necessarily have to do them, you don't even have to do them in order. And a lot of people do the PCT or the Appalachian Trail section hikes. You have time, you got 4 days off, so you do 4 days of the Appalachian Trail, go back to work, and then maybe a month later you got time to do another section. And so that's where my route is. My route is about a little bit longer than the John Muir Trail. It's 2/3 the elevation gain, which is kind of remarkable. The John Muir Trail is a lot of ups and downs and these mountain passes, but my route, the Inman 300, is 30,000 feet. And I don't even begin, I almost hate to say this in the same, I know the glory and the beauty of going on a, something like the John Muir Trail or, Sierra Trail, where, to sleep on the ground and the whole experience of waking up and drinking water, it's cold, fresh water, and enjoying the wind and the trees. and the camaraderie and all the different things that go into it, and the challenges of river crossings and things like that. The Inman 300 doesn't have that. I don't think it has to. I'm just saying the Inman 300 is a way. It's the way of the stairs across Los Angeles, and it's actually a pretty remarkable way to see the city. I think it's beautiful. Now I've done it. I first, when we did longer days. Now I've kind of reorganized it, partially because of my age and everything. It's 24 sections of 8 to 11 miles each, and so that's a lot of time invested, and you still have to get. Obviously, you're not walking a loop, otherwise you're never, you're not going to walk back to your car. So you have to think about transit or something like that. But it's partially created for it to be a flow, to be something that's really a beautiful experience, as well being efficient. You don't want to going up streets that you didn't have to go to, especially covered more elevation. You had to just for beauty. You still want to. It takes a long time to do this, so you try to be efficient too. So that's what it's all about. So this fellow here is the FKT. FKT is a expression mean fastest known time. And this guy, Joshua Bobcat is his trail name. He is a triple crowner, which means he's done on his own the PCT, the Appalachian Trail, the Colorado Divide Trail, those are three trails that people spend a whole summer doing, and so he's done those. But so he knows about it's like he's not a totally urban geek. He's a wilderness geek. He's a hiking geek, and he came out and did 40 miles a day, just blew the doors off of anything I ever imagined. And but other people have done since, not to break his record, but still get inquiries, and we've had it. It's been covered in Outside Online, and it's a thing. And I'm now working on a new guidebook, so I'm kind of. If someone asked me like tonight, I need all the information tomorrow. I said, well, give me a couple days, but it's getting there.
So this is LA, right? So is the Inman 300 your masterpiece? When you look back on your oeuvre of magnificence?
No, I don't think. I mean, I think the body of work leading the walks is really. I guess I would say that's my masterpiece. Is just the number of people that's have come and experienced it and enjoyed it, and the variety of neighborhoods we've covered, and I think that's, I guess, what I hang my hat on first. But I am proud of the Inman 300. I think, and I mean, I walked it last. I finished it last October. That was my 4th time, and it's fun. It's good, but it's a lot of work. It's a pain in the butt, but. I see cooler weather Saturday, and I'm thinking about doing one of those sections.
Wonderful. We're running a little short on time. Are there other things you want to delve into before we open up to the audience? Or?
Well, I mean, one of the things I just wanted to emphasize is this sounds like maybe something with a lot of definitions and structure, and the main thing is it's urban hiking. To kind of mix the idea of getting exercise in a city environment and while you're discovering the city is something everyone can do. And it doesn't, you don't necessarily have to do it with a group. You can do it on your own. You don't have to do it with a guidebook. Maybe it helps, but it's something you can invent, and you don't have to do it in LA. I mean, obviously, there's some great cities to do it in. And so I think it's something people should consider as a good way both to get exercise and to really enjoy the cities they live in. They become better neighbors by learning more about the people they share the city with. So I highly encourage it in that regard.
Beautiful. And what are the best ways to access those communities in the world? Just through a Facebook group or the book or websites?
Yeah, I mean, because there's a lot. Facebook is still a good way of doing it. There's different groups. Especially if you're thinking nationally, I think Facebook is a good way to start. I think if you even just search urban hiking, you find different definitions, but you still you might clue you into different people who are doing this. And as far as with me, the best thing to do is send me an email, and I have some cards, but you can contact me with the book has some information on how to contact me.
Beautiful. I prefer to be contacted by carrier pigeon, but you're old school in a different way. Audience, speaking of applause, round of applause. Questions?
I will try to, if there aren't, I'll initiate. As a hiker, I'm worried about bobcats and wildlife, and I try to wear fluorescent colors and make noise. Is there advice for the urban hiker if what to worry about and how to deal with it?
Well, you know, there's that's something a lot of people worry about. They think, well, in the wilderness, they think something bad's going to happen to them from an animal, especially if they're up in glaciers and like that. And they think in the city something's going to happen bad to them by way of another person. And yes, there's that possibility. I think the possibility is very slight. I think, you know, you want to be aware of your surroundings. But I mean, I think what I find is, and you know, I've been doing this now for a long time, is people are happy to see you, you know. So you're more likely, you got to watch out for cars. But I think the biggest thing is just watch for your step.
Roger that.
Hi, Jorge again, guest coming here. Question I had about your urban exploring. Los Angeles has been here for, I wouldn't say the longest time, but for quite a long time. What's your opinion on exploring the more ancient ruins of Los Angeles? You know, I know there's a lot of landmarks that are beautiful and wonderful today, but just an example, you know, like the old metro tunnels under Los Angeles that were used to sort of help build the much larger tunnels, like areas like that are sort of not necessarily, you know, off limits or closed off, but just a little more risque, I'd say.
I see Dave smiling. We used to talk about this, and I passed on Dave and a buddy went on the storm drain hike in Glendale, and I remember when the metro tunnel was open, you could wander in a little bit, and there's kind of this sort of graffiti heaven. I'm not, you know, I think you don't have to do something that's off limits to feel like you're getting the kind of sense of adventure or something that's that, you know, we do have. I'm sorry we weren't able to include it. I went on a walk with two friends inside the LA River, within, you know, from say right near here, from say Cypress Park, and we came out in Maywood, and it was like about 7.5 miles. And, you know, the LA River, because it's mostly water from secondary treatment of water, there's always has water and you get wet. And the surface is extremely slimy some places. And that's a walk I would never lead or I'd even write about because the liabilities are too great. I mean, just the three of us is everything we could do not to come out with a broken bone. And I think it was probably worse in that regard than I thought, but it was an amazing walk, and it's not. But we weren't doing anything that was unlawful, but we couldn't leave until you have to get to where the bike path starts again. There's a way of getting into the river in Lincoln Heights, and there's a way of getting into the river by the new 6th Street Bridge that's always been there, but. There's no other ways in and out of the river unless you're really ready to, you know, scale, you know, walk up a steep embankment and scale a fence and go across railroad tracks. You know. So, you know, basically you're in for it once you start. And it was an amazing experience. It was like probably maybe one of the best LA urban hikes I've ever taken. But I think generally I get enough excitement, and with the walks that are a little more straightforward, they still have enough mystery involved.
Hi, Raymond Castillo here. My question to you is there any part of LA that you might simply just avoid for whatever reason? I know that in exploring Los Angeles alone and the wilderness of Los Angeles, there are certain sections that I personally choose to enjoy because of experiences. So is there any that you would?
Interesting. Some areas I would avoid just because they're too boring. They're too flat, too much of a grid of streets. I will say, and I mean, I know this. I mean, I'm just an old white guy, and people don't view me as a threat. And so I know with neighborhoods that, you know, I don't, you know, there's some places, certainly some hours you don't want to go. Some places, yeah, I would say, you know, don't draw attention to it. Why even do it? But, you know, I mean, and I know that that's kind of a privilege I have that other people, certainly young people of color, don't have this passport to travel in and out of different neighborhoods because of, you know, the whole history of you know, regionalism and gangs and stuff like that, that, you know, it isn't, I'm lucky for the passport I have.
Hi, Vincent Mejia. So are there any other big cities that you'd like to pursue urban hiking in, whether it be in the state, country, or even in the world?
Yeah, I've seen a lot. There's a trail I'd love to do in San Francisco. It's fairly new. It's called the Crosstown, San Francisco Crosstown Trail. It starts, you know, it's just 17 miles, but it has about 2,600 feet elevation gain. And I think I would do it in 2 days. I'd do it by myself or maybe a couple of friends from LA. Starts by Candlestick Park, ends by the old, that famous restaurant, that Cliff House. And it just bobs and weaves and zigzags. It's, you know, that's like my hikes. A good urban hike is not meant to be, you know, the shortest distance between 2 points. It's meant to show something off. Pittsburgh is kind of that's the big one. You know, it's just the, you know, the weather in Pittsburgh is so awful. It's either too cold or too hot or too wet. And but, you know, Pittsburgh has such a hilly environment and so many stairways. And, you know, I'd love to be able to work something out and do that. And I'm not sure if that's ever going to happen. It's maybe more likely that I'd do Portland or Seattle, which are great places to walk, and I have done walking there. International, we talked about Paris. Somebody gave us a list of, you know, in Europe, there's no reason to talk about public stairways because it's like talking about, you know, sidewalks. It's just so ingrained in the built environment. So somebody had a list of public stairways in Paris. And we were talking about, you know, making a little walk, you know, just doing the stairways and seeing where that got us. And, you know, that's a kind of a dream, but I'm not sure where we'll pull that off. But, you know, so the international, I guess I think of that. I mean, anywhere I go, I do enjoy cities. I mean, I enjoy, in Europe, I'm more likely to go do something that's mountainous. But, I mean, I do enjoy European cities. So that's probably the limit of my travel ambition now. I don't think I would go to, you know, other continents. But, you know, I'm sure that, you know, if I went to spend a day in any European city, I would try to devise, you know, at least an 8-mile walk that, you know, that covered a lot of different sites.
Hi, Bobby Mejia here. I was wondering if you had any bad experiences, whether solo or going with a group, or maybe at least a close call or a bad day.
You know, funny enough, not very few, almost none. Maybe I'll close this with a little story. It's short. That that is kind of a good experience where you think it maybe, you say, oh, So I have this thing about I buy these clothes from REI, and sometimes they tend to all look the same. It's like, and I tell myself, I don't go out wearing khaki plus khaki plus khaki because you just look like a clown. You look like you're trying to pretend to be something. And one day, so I try to mix my colors. And one day, the colors were on the laundry or something like that. So it's just what I had. Hat like this, khaki shirt, khaki pants. And I'm in East LA doing a route that was part of the Inman 300, catching the Stairway. So I had to go a certain way. So I'm down south of Cesar Chavez, and I go up and down over a stairway. And there's this guy, on the stairs, because you can't see him because the stair has this little humpback. So you can't see him in advance. So there he is, and he's got his paraphernalia out there, and, he's doing something that, I don't want to sneak up on him. But but I still want to go that way, so I don't not really think it's necessary to turn around. So I just, I kind of clear my throat or drag my foot just so he knows I'm there, and so it doesn't feel like I'm, aggressively sneaking up on him. But I thought maybe he'd harass me or something. And he looks at me, but he's kind of bleary-eyed. He just stares at me real hard. He says, "Are you an explorer?" And if that was the only thing that happened that day, it probably wouldn't be a story. But then 3 hours later, still dressed as I was in kind of this dumb, fake or African explorer costume, it looked like, I'm now approaching downtown. I'm getting ready to go over the 4th Street Bridge. And there's an area that is being cleaned up by a street crew. But then and obviously a street person, a homeless person that was kind of doing a little cleanup of his own area. And I see him, and I come up close, because I have to go up to this stairway. And he says, "Crocodile Dundee! Can I have your autograph?" And it's like, and I'm just thinking, as I'm thinking, I'm infringing this guy's grounds. And he's like so excited, and I'd stop and talk for a little while, and I start going over the bridge, and I can still, bye, Crocodile Dundee. And so, that's my closing story. Is usually I have more experiences like that than I have bad experiences. So occasionally we have just a word said or something, but really, we do pretty well.
Cool, marvelous.
Okay.
Well, thank you again.
All right.
Urban Hikes in Southern California. Please join the movement or the joy or all that. And thank you for watching, and please explore the other videos that the club has put out, and take care of yourselves. Thank you again.
All right. Thanks a lot.